Welcome aboard the dark waters of the TheNiteKrew podcast, where true crime meets the unknown. Each month we dive into the eerie, the unsolved, and the stories that haunt the shadows. If it's creepy, mysterious, or just plain unsettling, you'll find it here. So light your lantern, step onto the deck, and prepare to uncover what lies beneath the surface.
This podcast contains discussions of true crime, disturbing content, and mature themes that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The TheNiteKrew podcast aims to present stories with respect to the victims and their families, and the intent is never to sensationalize tragedy, but to shed light on the unknown and unexplained.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 32 of TheNiteKrew, the podcast where we dive deep into the darkest corners of true crime, unsolved mysteries, disappearances, and the stories that stay with you long after the episode ends. Here, we uncover the chilling details behind real-life horrors, explore the psychology of the people involved, and give a voice to the victims whose stories deserve to be remembered. So whether you're listening alone in the dark, driving down an empty road at midnight, or curled up under the covers chasing that next terrifying story, you're officially part of the TheNiteKrew. And tonight's case is one that's incredibly difficult to hear because the cruelty involved feels almost unimaginable. This is the horrifying murder of Jennifer Daugherty. Jennifer Daugherty was born on November 8th, 1979, and by all accounts, the people closest to her described her as kind-hearted, trusting, and deeply emotional. She loved spending time with people and wanted badly to feel accepted. But that trusting nature would ultimately place her in the path of some incredibly dangerous individuals. Jennifer lived in Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania, a small town about 40 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Life hadn't always been easy for her. She had an intellectual disability that made her more vulnerable to manipulation and had the intellectual capacity of a 14-year-old. According to family members, she often struggled to recognize when people were taking advantage of her. But, despite these challenges, Jennifer tried to live as independently as possible. She loved music, socializing, and spending time with friends. Her family said she had a huge heart and cared deeply about the people around her. And that's what makes this case so devastating. Because the people Jennifer believed were her friends would eventually become the very people responsible for her torture and murder. In early February of 2010, Jennifer began spending time with a group of people in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Greensburg is a quiet city that at that time, most people would never have associated with a crime this horrific. Jennifer met the group through mutual acquaintances in the Greensburg area. Before the murder, she had been spending time around local social circles where people gathered to drink, use drugs, and hang out at different apartments. The group mostly stayed around a small apartment on South Maple Avenue. It was a rundown place where people constantly came and went. Drugs, alcohol, fighting, and chaos were very common there. Neighbors later described the apartment as unsettling, even before Jennifer's murder happened. Inside that apartment were 6 people who would later become known across the country as the Greensburg Six. The group included Angela, Ricky, Melvin Knight, Amber, Peggy Miller, and Robert Masters Jr. At first, Jennifer appeared to think these people genuinely liked her. She spent time with them, hung around the apartment, and tried to fit in socially. Some members of the group reportedly acted friendly toward her at first, but investigators would later discover that many of them mocked her behind her back and treated her cruelly even before the violence escalated. And over the course of just a few days in February 2010, things inside that apartment would spiral into absolute horror. On February 8th, 2010, Melvin and his girlfriend, Amber, met with Ricky, Angela, Robert, and Peggy, along with the victim, Jennifer Daugherty, at a bus station in Greensburg, PA. Jennifer had planned to attend a doctor's appointment that following day, so she had planned to be at Ricky's apartment that whole night. Later on in the day, Melvin and Amber joined Ricky, Peggy, and Robert at Ricky's apartment, where they were invited to stay the night too. Later in the night, Jennifer arrived and tried to be intimate with Ricky, who turned her away and became angry. The next day, Jennifer decided to stay at the apartment instead of leaving to go to her doctor's appointment. Ricky called Angela and informed her of Jennifer's sexual advances the night before, and Angela became jealous, stating, "Nobody is having sex with my man." This is when the group began bullying the victim by taking things from her purse and pouring mouthwash on her purse and clothing. When Angela arrived, she and Amber took turns assaulting Jennifer in the bathroom by striking her chest and head and shoving her into a towel rack several times. Jennifer was then dragged into the living room where Angela poured water on her. Afterwards, Melvin and Ricky dumped spices and oatmeal on her head. So essentially, they were finding whatever they could and poured it on Jennifer, just to make her unsettled and scared. So then Ricky told Jennifer to shower, which she did. Then, Melvin forced her to remove her clothes, threw them out the window, and cut off Jennifer's hair. Later, Melvin sexually assaulted Jennifer. That evening, Robert and Peggy were instructed to stay with Jennifer as they left. Peggy stated that Jennifer was trying to leave, so Melvin and the rest of the group returned to the house and beat her. The next day involved multiple family meetings, during which the group discussed and agreed on their next course of abuse. In the morning, Angela pushed Jennifer to the floor and hit her, and in response, Jennifer kneed Angela in the stomach. Despite the fact that Angela was not pregnant, she accused Jennifer of killing her unborn baby and insisted that Ricky choose between her and Jennifer. Melvin and Amber later took Jennifer into the bathroom where they made her drink 3 separate concoctions. First, Angela's urine. Second, a combination of feces and urine. And third, a mixture of powdered detergent and Amber's prescription medication. They forced her to drink these concoctions by striking her in the head with the towel rack until she obeyed, while gagging and vomiting. Melvin later took Jennifer into the living room where he and Ricky bound her wrists and ankles with Christmas lights and garland, and nail polish was then painted onto Jennifer's face. Melvin and the others finally called a family meeting and voted to kill Jennifer. And Ricky forced the victim, or Jennifer, to pen a suicide note. Ricky gave Melvin a knife, telling him, "You know what to do." And by the way, you can go online and see the picture of the note. It's truly, really sad what she was forced to write before they ultimately murdered her. So then Melvin and Amber took Jennifer into the bathroom, forced her to kneel, and turned off the light. Before Melvin asked her if she was ready to die, and stabbed her in the chest and stabbed and sliced her neck. Melvin told the others Jennifer wasn't dead yet, so Ricky took the knife and sliced Jennifer's wrists, and he and Melvin proceeded to choke Jennifer with Christmas lights. After a final family meeting, it was decided that Melvin and Ricky would dispose of Jennifer's body by putting her into a garbage can and removing her from the scene. On February 11th, 2010, Jennifer was found the next morning under a truck in a nearby middle school parking lot. Her body was found stuffed into a large garbage can, head first, still bound in Christmas decorations and partially covered with plastic bags. As detectives investigated, they began tracing Jennifer's last known movements. Multiple witnesses pointed them toward the apartment on South Maple Avenue. And once investigators entered that apartment, the scene they found was horrifying. There was blood throughout the home. Evidence of a struggle was everywhere. Prosecutors later said the apartment contained clear signs of prolonged torture. The condition of the crime scene made it obvious Jennifer had suffered immensely before her death. It didn't take long for police to begin arresting the people connected to the apartment. One by one, the 6 suspects were taken into custody. And as investigators questioned them, the stories started falling apart almost immediately. Some blamed each other, some claimed they were too scared to stop the violence, which is bullshit. Others admitted they had been present but tried minimizing their involvement, which is also bogus. But prosecutors argued that every single person inside that apartment had opportunities to help Jennifer, and instead chose to participate, encourage it, or ignore it. The public reaction was intense. People across Pennsylvania were horrified by the sheer cruelty of the case. Many were especially disturbed because Jennifer was known to be vulnerable and trusting. Then came the trials. And once testimony began, the details revealed in court were so graphic and disturbing that many people in the courtroom reportedly cried or walked out during the proceedings. The trials of the Greensburg Six stretched over several years, and each defendant tried to distance themselves from what had happened inside that apartment. But prosecutors painted a very different picture. They argued that this wasn't a momentary act of violence or a crime committed in panic. They said Jennifer endured hours of torture while multiple people actively participated, encouraged it, or stood by and allowed it to continue. During testimony, jurors heard horrifying details about Jennifer's final hours. Witnesses described the beatings, the humiliation, and the fear Jennifer experienced while begging for mercy. Some of the defendants attempted to shift the blame primarily onto Angela and Ricky, who prosecutors identified as 2 of the most violent participants in the attack. But what shocked many people was how long the abuse lasted, and how many chances there were for someone to stop it. Instead, nobody called the police. Nobody helped Jennifer escape, and nobody showed her compassion. As the trials continued, Peggy Miller pleaded guilty and testified against the others during trial proceedings. She received a sentence of 35 to 74 years in prison. Amber also cooperated with prosecutors and testified during the trials. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Robert Masters pleaded guilty to third-degree murder and conspiracy charges. He received a sentence of 15 to 30 years in prison. Melvin Knight was accused of participating in the torture and helping restrain Jennifer during the attack. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. However, after Pennsylvania's death penalty ban, his sentence, like others on death row in the state, became effectively paused indefinitely. The harshest punishments were reserved for Angela and Ricky. Angela was considered one of the main ringleaders in Jennifer's torture and murder. Prosecutors said she participated heavily in the abuse and encouraged others throughout the attack. She was convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to death in 2012. Ricky was Jennifer's on and off boyfriend and another central figure in the torture. Prosecutors described him as deeply involved in the violence from beginning to end. He was also convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. As of today, all 6 are still alive and incarcerated. For Jennifer's family, though, no sentence could undo what happened. One of the most emotional moments surrounding the case was the public learning about the note Jennifer left for her mother before she disappeared. In it, she simply told her mom she loved her and hoped she had a good day at work. That small note became heartbreaking to people following the case because it reflected who Jennifer really was: kind, loving, and completely unaware of the horror she was about to face. Even now, the murder of Jennifer remains one of the most disturbing true crime cases in Pennsylvania history, not only because of the brutality, but because of how vulnerable Jennifer was and how badly she wanted friendship from the very people who destroyed her life. After Jennifer's murder, there was a push in Pennsylvania for what became commonly referred to as Jennifer's Law. It wasn't a single dramatic law that instantly changed everything nationwide, but rather a set of legislative efforts inspired by her case, aimed at preventing vulnerable adults from slipping through the cracks in missing persons cases. What Jennifer's Law focuses on. The main goal of the proposed law was to change how police handle missing persons reports, especially for vulnerable adults and individuals with intellectual disabilities. Key changes included no waiting period to report someone missing. Before this, some departments discouraged or delayed filing reports if the person was an adult. The reform pushed for immediate action. Faster entry into national databases like NCIC. Law enforcement would be required to quickly enter missing vulnerable individuals into national systems so alerts could spread faster. Better training for officers, specifically on how to recognize and respond to cases involving people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And then there was improved coordination between agencies. So to prevent delays when someone goes missing under suspicious or high-risk circumstances. The bigger purpose of it all? The law was essentially about one thing: making sure someone like Jennifer, a vulnerable adult who trusted people easily, would not be ignored, delayed, or dismissed if she ever went missing again. And that's where we're going to leave this case for tonight. Jennifer's story is one that's incredibly difficult to sit with, but one that deserves to be told and remembered. Thank you for spending your time with us and listening all the way through. To everyone who continues to support the Night Crew, whether you've been here from the beginning or this is your very first episode, I truly appreciate you. This podcast wouldn't even exist without you all, so thank you. If you want to support the show, make sure to follow, share the episode, and leave a comment or a review. It really helps more than you know. We'll be back soon with another story from the darker side of true crime. Until then, stay safe and take care of each other.